Good day, all. This is Bill Stearns from Active Countermeasures. I'm going to go through the install process for placing AC Hunter Community Edition onto a system using VMware. This is for a fresh install, not for an upgrade. We'll walk through the instructions together, see how this is done. First place to go is the AC Hunter Community Edition homepage. You get there from activecountermeasures.com. And if I scroll down on the AC Hunter menu to Community Edition, this is the page that has all the details about AC Hunter CE. News, downloads, documentation, and support. I encourage you to start off with downloads because the download can take a while. There are two choices. One is a virtual machine for VMware that we'll be covering on this video. And the second is an installer file. You don't need to pull down both. We've already done the installation for you on a VMware image. So in this case, I'll encourage you to click on this link and the file will come down. I'm not going to start it here because I've already pulled it down to save some time. If I take a look at the home directory on my system, I already have AC Hunter v631 Community Edition.zip. By the way, 630 and 631 are the same. If your page, if you're seeing this in the future and you've got a new version, go with that. If I run the command SHA-256-SUM, the name of the file that I just downloaded, I get back a long hex string that I want to compare against the hex string that's up on this page. This proves to me that the file has been fully downloaded and hasn't been corrupted in transit. So in this case, because both of these start with 28D2 and end in 6B, 6A, I'm reasonably confident that this is the same file, and so I'll continue. The next place to look once you've got this downloaded is to go back to the Community Edition page and then switch over to Documentation. In this, we have the pre-install guide that talks about the resources needed to run AC Hunter, the user guide, which is a general manual for how to use AC Hunter CE, and then two install guides, one for VMware and one for the tar file. If you're interested in using the tar file approach, we have a separate video for that. Please go and take a look at that video instead. But because we're using the VMware approach, I'm going to right-click and open this up in a new tab. And down comes the PDF of the install process that we're going to be following today. At the top of the document are prerequisites. You should have a 64-bit Intel or AMD system. You need a copy of VMware of some kind. We tend to use VMware Workstation, although we have had people who have had good luck with Fusion and ESXi. You may be able to use VMware Player. Please keep in mind that Fusion, ESXi, and Player may have additional steps that you'll need to follow in order to be able to do this install. VMware Workstation is encouraged. For drive space, we hope that you'll have at least 300 gigabytes of space available for AC Hunter. If you're just doing some limited testing, but don't plan to have a regular feed from a sensor, you could probably get away with 200 gigabytes or maybe even a little less. All right. So now we have the prerequisites out of the way. Let's actually go through the install process. On the PDF, we're giving you the commands to run. So I'm going to make sure that I'm in my home directory. I am. I'm going to make AC-Hunter-VM and AC-Hunter-storage. The reason why we have two separate directories for these is that we are saving the data between AC Hunter versions in the AC Hunter storage directory. That means that in the future, we expect that you'll be able to simply disconnect the extra storage that has all of your AC Hunter data and hook it back up to a new version, such as AC Hunter 6.4 or 6.5. So we make those directories, and we're going to go into AC-Hunter-VM. And I'm going to move the zip file that I just mentioned from the next directory up into here. So if I take a directory listing, there's that zip file. To open it up, in most cases, you'll simply run unzip, which is available in most operating systems. And I'm going to unzip that file. Now, when you come to actually install this, you have a few steps to run inside VMware. Depending on which version of VMware you have, the interface is going to look probably different from this. That's just fine. So if I mention something and you don't have that particular menu or it's not laid out the same directory, try to follow the steps in general. So when I choose File Open, for example, mine happens to be under the File menu. Yours might be somewhere else. Just try to follow along as best you can. Now, in just a moment, this will have opened up and we can do the install steps. I do want to remind you of one thing before we continue, and that is when we've loaded it up, don't immediately start up the virtual machine. We do have to make a couple of settings changes before we continue. So please work with me. In step 6 in the VMware guide, we walk through what those settings are. Please make sure you do those before you actually start it up because we need the extra storage space for all of the VMware content, all of the logs and databases that you're hoping to preserve through to the next version. All right, so that zip file has finished opening. Now we come back up here to actually load up this virtual machine. When I go to File, Open, I'm going to go into the AC Hunter VM directory, and you'll notice I only get one directory to look in. That's what was opened up in the zip file. And the file that I'm looking at is .vmx, and that's the correct one to work with. Please don't try to directly load a .vmdk disk into AC Hunter. That is an individual storage unit that's part of the virtual machine, but it's not the whole virtual machine. So make sure you select the .vmx file. In this case, I've got it, so I'll choose Open. And now I get a new entry inside VMware that shows this virtual machine. Again, don't start it up yet. Let's do the settings. So Edit Virtual Machine Settings. And now we're into step 6 in the PDF that I'm following along on the right. Couple of things to check. Memory should be at least 16 gigabytes. If you're severely limited on memory and you're only planning to use this for testing, you could bring this down to 12. We strongly recommend that you don't go below 12 gigabytes because AC Hunter does use a lot of memory. For processors, we encourage 4. You might be able to get away with 2. I wouldn't really recommend it for production use, but you could certainly use it for testing. Now, if you have any entries down here that you simply don't need, if you get something like a sound card or a printer and you know you're never going to use them, you could remove them. But our next job in general is to add the storage where AC Hunter will place all of the logs and databases that it's working with. So I'm going to choose Add. We're going to select hard disk. That's the default. SCSI is the type of hard disk. Leave that at the default as well. And most of the time, you're going to say create a new virtual disk. If you're doing a future upgrade, you may have an option to use an existing virtual disk. We're not going to cover that in this particular video, but we're going to create a new one. The size is interesting. We're going to ask for 200 gigabytes. Now note, we don't immediately use all of that space. We're simply going to put a couple of placeholders down on the host operating system's drive saying, we have these files and in them we're going to place content, but it doesn't use 200 gigabytes right off the bat. It might use less than a gigabyte. As you add logs and databases, the amount of space that you take up on the host will grow and grow and grow. So make sure that what you're asking for could fit on the host's hard drive, but just be aware that we don't use that all right off the bat. If I checked off this box, allocate all disk space now, it would use up all 200 gigabytes. That's not really what I want. Although if you want to make sure that you never over-allocate disk space, that's fine to check this off. We don't care if you store all the content as a single file out on the host or if you split it up into multiple files. I just would suggest leaving it as the default unless you have a reason to change. All right. Next step is to see what you want to call it. And in this case, I'm going to move this over to AC Hunter Storage as the drive. And for the name of the actual disk images, I'm going to change this over to AC Hunter Storage. AC-Hunter-Storage.vmdk. Once you've done that, choose Open and/or Finish. And now we've added a 200 gigabyte drive where the content will be stored, and we have the 60 gigabyte drive that's used for the operating system and AC Hunter and all the miscellaneous bits. Okay. Don't click these entries down here at the moment. You're not going to mount this. That'll happen automatically during the first boot. If you later need to come back and add more space for your log files, you can do that. You can extend this to 300 gigabytes or 500 gigabytes or a terabyte. Make sure you obviously have enough space on the host OS. So finally, once you've done that, you can choose Save. And once all of that is done, we have the 2 hard drives, we have 16 gigabytes of storage, we have 4 processors, we can start this up. So choose Start this guest operating system. You may be given 2 questions. This one is, was this virtual machine moved or copied? Your answer to that is, I copied it. So choose that. Depending on which flavor of VMware you're using, you may also be asked, do you want to create a new unique identifier for the virtual machine or keep the old one? If you're asked that, choose Create. In this case, I've got some additional hardware. VMware is pointing out that I could attach it to this virtual machine. I don't have to. So I'm going to choose OK, and that message will go away. What you get are some notes coming up saying that we are preparing the storage space, that 200 gigabyte drive. We have some content that has to be moved over to it. This copy will take a little while on the first boot, and when it's done, it's going to totally reboot. So don't be surprised if on this first one up, you don't actually get to log in. It has some preparation that it has to do. When it's done, it reboots and it comes back up, and then you'll be able to log in on the console. We're often asked about the passwords for this. There is no password for this system. The password is automatically set by this system when it comes back up. So when you get a console to log in, you're going to see the name of the account and the password to use. Now, obviously, the password that's going to come up on my screen is not going to be the same password as you'll get on your screen. So the first rule is write this down. So I'm going to do that right now. And when you get to this step on your install, make sure you actually write down this password, because there's no other place to get it than right on this screen, right here, right now. I'm going to write this down and double check it. There we go. Note that that password will not contain 0, 1, 5, or vertical pipe characters. So if I see something that looks like a lowercase o, it is a lowercase o. It is not a 0, for example. Now that we have this, I can log in on this console as that data import user. Data import is the name of the account, and the password is that one above. Depending on what you have for your VMware version, you may not be able to do cut and paste, unfortunately. We apologize for that, but that's a limitation of VMware. And if I've typed that in correctly, we are in. So a couple of things to pay attention to. Note up near the top of the screen is the main IP address for this system. This particular virtual machine is going to be located at 192.168.97.142. So look on your screen and see what IP address is assigned to ENS33. You'll need that in later instructions. What I'm going to do is replace the current password, and it'll ask me for my current one. And I'm going to assign a different one. Great. And to check that, I can press Control-Alt-F2 to switch to a different terminal. You'll notice still claiming my password is still up there. But I want to double check that this password works. So I can log in there. And I'm logged in as a second console. Great. So I'll switch back to the first one. If for some reason you don't see the the IP address for ENS33, you can always check it, even if it's scrolled off the screen, with the command IP space ADDR space show space dev space ENS33. And if I do pipe grep space inet, it'll show me just the lines that have inet on them. And so there's a 192.168.97.142 that I'll need in future instructions. Now that we're in here, let's go and set ourselves up with a user account for logging into the web interface. The command for that is manage_web_user.sh. The request for it on the command line is reset. And the account that we're going to use is usually welcome@activecountermeasures.com. You can use anything you want. So I'm going to use bob@example.com. It doesn't have to match my actual email address, but you just come up with something that you can remember. And because I don't specify a password, it's going to ask me for one to use. And if those two match, it's now going to put that in place. Now note, I need to have the data import password in order to make that change permanent. And in just a moment, it's going to put those changes in place. It will make that password available. So I just have to remember that in this case, I chose bob@example.com when it comes time to log into the web interface. Once we've got that done, I'm going to type exit. I'm logged out. Let me go and log out at the other console as well. Exit. And now I'm going to shut this down with the red square to shut this down. Yes, I would like to. This takes just a moment. We have to shut down AC Hunter as well. Now, once that's done, we're back to a powered off state. In order to set up the networking, I need to come back to what's called the Virtual Network Editor. Now, if you're using VMware Player, I believe, this does not come with a Virtual Network Editor. My understanding is that even though you may not have a license for VMware Workstation, it is still possible to download the VMware Workstation distribution and get the Virtual Network Editor out of that. That's going to need some help from Google for the exact steps necessary, but I believe that's possible. So, assuming that you're using VMware Workstation, we come up to Edit. We choose Virtual Network Editor. And because I'm making changes on the host operating system, I have to type my password for the account that I'm using on the host. And up comes the virtual network editor. All right. For these changes, I come down to the network interface that's marked NAT, and I choose NAT settings over here to the right. I'm going to add 2 entries. One allows me to SSH to the virtual machine. The other allows me to reach the web interface on the virtual machine. The first one to add, I'm going to say if anybody tries to talk to port 2222 on the host, I want to send them inside IP address, and this is where I have to use that IP address I wrote down from earlier, 192.168.97.142, and it's going to land in port 22, the normal SSH port on that virtual machine. And just for my own reference, I'm going to mark that this is AC-Hunter SSH. And I choose Save That. Now I'm going to add one more entry. In this case, I'm going to map host port 8443 to that same IP address, 192.168.97.142. And that's going to go into port 443, which is the default port for HTTPS web servers. And that means I'm going to put a comment in here called AC Hunter Web so that I can know what that redirect is for. So once I've added those 2, I'm all set. If you plan to use the cyber deception module, you have 2 other port forwards that you'll need to add as well. You can come back and add those later. We encourage you to shut AC Hunter completely down while you make these changes and then bring it back up later. I'm not certain that's entirely required, but I would encourage it. Once you've added the initial 2 port forwards and you've added these last 2 port forwards for cyber deception, if you want to use them, come down and choose Save. And once you've done that, you also need to choose Save inside the virtual network editor to make those changes permanent. And then that goes away. Now, you'll need to restart AC Hunter. So choose Start again, and up it comes. The next thing to be aware of is that when you want to reach AC Hunter, either on the host itself or on some other machine in your building, you need to put the IP address of the AC Hunter system on your web URL. I'll show you how to do this. We've started up the AC Hunter virtual machine, and I'm going to come back to my web browser, and I'm going to go to https://127.0.0.1:8443. This will work for a web browser that's running on the same computer as VMware. If you're coming from a different computer, then you'll need to put the IP address of the VMware host here instead of 127.0.0.1. But since I'm running on the same host, I'll use just the local host IP address. I'll get a warning that this is a not signed certificate. If you want to replace this with a valid certificate, you absolutely can. Check on the support channel and we'll show you how to do that. But because I'm just using the self-signed certificate that came with AC Hunter, I'll need to say go to advanced and then proceed. Now I type in that user account that I typed earlier. In this case, it was bob@example.com. And I'm going to put in the password that we're going to use for bob@example.com. That was the one that I typed earlier. And once I have entered that, I now get a request for which database would you like to work with. You have to just pick one. These are the example databases that come with AC Hunter. I'm just going to grab VS Agent. Any of them are fine. And what you get is the default display after you've logged into AC Hunter. which is the dashboard. And here you have the sample database loaded. You have some threat scores for different IP addresses on this sample network. And for any given IP address like 1055.100.111, we show you that it has a threat score of about 152, and then we explain what makes up that threat score. In this case, there are beacons web traffic, there's beacon traffic, and there are long connections also coming from this one system. So I could go to any of those by just clicking on that line, and I'll be carried over to that tab with this IP address automatically put in as a filter for the source. So we have a working copy of AC Hunter. Let's take a look at what the last bits of cleanup are. If you want to SSH to this system because you want to make more changes or you want to work directly with the host, note that you need to change the port to which you connect. So the command you're going to use is SSH space -P and then the number of the port that you forwarded, which in this case is 2222. You're going to the account data import, and then you put the VMware host IP address. Let's take a look at how that works. So I'm going to do SSH space -P space 2222, and I'm going to go to the data import account and in this case, I'm going to do 127.0.0.1. If you're coming from another host on the network, then you'll need to put the IP address of the VMware host system in order to get to it. When you first connect, it's going to tell you that I have a fingerprint. Are we sure that this is the right system to get to? Now, normally this is a tough one to answer, but with VMware, you actually have a good way to check. So what I'm going to do is log in on the console as the data import user, and I'm going to run a command that will check that fingerprint. Now note down here on the command line, SSH is trying to use an ECDSA fingerprint. So let's check what that ECDSA fingerprint should be. And the command to do that is sudo space SSH-keygen dash, here we go, l-f/etc/ssh_host_ECDSA_key. And when I run that, it will obviously ask me for my password, as it always will when you're running sudo. And what comes back is the fingerprint for that host key. Now, notice you got SHA-256:Z_O-SPMTY. And if you come back down to the command line where we're trying to log in over SSH, it starts with Z_O-SPMTY. Yours will obviously be totally different. But as long as what you get on the command line matches what you got from the console, you are confident that this is the right system that you're reaching. So I'm going to say yes in this case. Apparently I took too long, so let's try that again. And we'll reconnect, and now we are in. Okay. So there are a couple more notes about how to set up a config block to make that connection a little easier, not have to type that port all the time. Those are in the instructions. You have the ability to reach your AC Hunter system with a web browser either on the VMware host itself or off on another system. Just pay attention to the fact that instead of typing 127.0.0.1, you really do want to come up with the IP address of the VMware host. And finally, if you want to set up a sensor to feed AC Hunter, we've included instructions on that down at the bottom. This will be on another physical system. We don't encourage running packet capture tools on a virtual machine. It's technically possible, but we don't encourage it. The steps for it are relatively short. So you log into the machine that you want to be your Zeek sensor. You run these 4 commands. There's a curl command, there's a sudo wget command that wraps, there's a sudo chmod command, and a Zeek pull. Finally, you run Zeek start. Total of 5 commits. Now, to actually connect that sensor to AC Hunter, you run the 3 curl commands that pull down files onto onto your Zeek sensor. And finally, you run bash connect_sensor.sh, and then the IP address or host name of your AC Hunter host. Now, let's say you've done all of this and you've got a sensor hooked up, but you still have questions. If you're running into problems, come back to the AC Hunter Community Edition page. We have documentation here. We already showed you the pre-install guide. The user guide is where you'll find most of the detail about how AC Hunter works. That's a great place to start. But if you still have questions that aren't getting answered, come down to Community Edition support. We've set up a discussion channel on the Threat Hunter Community Discord, which can be reached here, discord.gg/threathunter. And once you've logged into that and accepted the invitation, go to #ACH-CE-support. And this is the community discussion channel where you can ask questions and get help on how AC Hunter works. Note that you'll need to wait 5 minutes before you can post. It's an anti-spam measure. We apologize. We also have a FAQ available. So if you click on the FAQ, I'm going to open this up in a new tab. We have a document that talks about how AC Hunter works, some quirks about how to use this under ESXi, some notes about using this under VMware Player, and so on. We hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have questions, please come on over to the Discord channel. We'll be happy to help you as best we can, and the community will be glad to help you as we can. Thank you so much for your interest in AC Hunter Community Edition.